I think I figured out why there is this perception that the Packers are going to regress in 2024. Plus, why didn't they do anything to address the cornerback position?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. And thanks to everyone, because today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I have figured out why the perception of the Packers, particularly on offense, is that they will regress, despite no one being able to offer me any convincing evidence as to why that might be. And it became most clear to me in ESPN projections. I think there were fantasy projections, but Mike Clay always does fantasy projections, and he does like player quality projections, and then he combines all of the position groups and ranks the teams, right? And he ranked the Jets as the best team in the league, which immediately makes me skeptical of the whole exercise. But I thought about it, and the reason that put it into stark clarity for me is because I remember last year arguing with Mike about the Packers' offensive line being too low. And then they went out. David Bakhtiari got hurt, and they still performed like a top 5 pass protecting unit. The run blocking still was not great, but as a pass protection unit, which is the much more important trait, they performed extremely, extremely well. And I wasn't going to argue with anyone who thought, the quarterback was not going to play well, or that you were skeptical that he was going to play well, or that the receivers were unproven, all those things. I totally understand starting at that point last year. Hey, the quarterback's got to prove it. The receivers have got to prove it. But then they did it. And so any preconceived notion that you had about those players is now rendered moot. Because what I think is happening is everyone that thinks they're going to regress, that is doing this in good faith, that isn't a Bears fan, a Lions fan, a Vikings fan, a Cowboys fan, a 49ers fan. They are saying they outperformed not just expectation, but their abilities last year, and therefore are more likely to regress in 2024. The problem with that analysis is it's based on a false premise. It's based on the premise that they exceeded expectation last year, but the problem is your expectations were almost certainly wrong. Because there was no baseline for Jordan Love. This was based on a pre-draft evaluation from the fact that he hadn't played for 3 years. We had no evidence. We had no frame of reference for his performance. Jaden Reed is a rookie. Dontavian Wicks is a rookie. Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, they were rookies. Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, they were first-year starters. We didn't know what this was going to look like. And then they set the baseline. The youngest pass-catching group ever. A first-time starter at quarterback. First-time starters at tackle. Your star running back hurt all season. First-year starters. First-year pass catchers. First-year players. All over. No, they didn't outperform their abilities. They outperformed your expectation, and they outperformed my expectations too. But our expectations mean nothing in this case. They mean nothing. Because if you have a player with no body of work, and then all they have is the data that we have, then that's the baseline. Now, once you get to year 2, then it changes. And we have more information, and then we can start to project based on that. But you can't have Jayden Reed, who was drafted above consensus and where we thought he was expected to go and all those things, and he outperforms all those expectations. You can't go, well, he's bound to regress because I didn't think he'd be this good. Well, we didn't think Justin Jefferson would be as good as he was as a rookie. I didn't hear crowds of people going, well, he's going to regress, because everyone thought he was going to be good, just not that good. And so this strikes me as ass covering. Going, well, Jordan Love can't possibly be as good as he ended up being last year. And Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave and Zach Tom and Rasheed Walker. And what happens is you get to the end of that and you realize in order for regression to hit, you need 8+ players to all have outperformed their ceilings last year. And the reality is that didn't happen. Just like the law of statistics says that is a near impossibility. So the idea that they would all come back, quote unquote, back to earth when our expectations of what earth was supposed to be was based solely on our own preconceived notions about what these players were. And I, as someone who believed in Jordan Love, thought Jordan Love would be good, did not think he would be this good. But I'm not going into this season going, well, he has to come back to earth. Now, you could say, if you wanted to be uncharitable, that's because I want him to be good. And that's true because I want to be right about Jordan Love. But remember, that's the thing that matters most to me. And anyone who has listened to me for more than like a week knows that that's true. Anyone who knows me knows that that's true. I care about being right first and foremost. My analysis, I want my analysis to be right. And part of that is because I want you guys to come back to feel like he told me this was going to happen. He told me this player was going to be good, and he was. Or he told me this player was going to be bad, and he was, Justin Fields. And so that is how I think, how you buy trust with an audience is not to pander to them. I believe in respecting your intelligence enough for you to make a decision based on how you think I'm doing as an analyst. And if I'm not doing well, why would you trust me? But so, like, I think it's possible for some of these guys to take a step back in year 2. The sophomore slump is a thing, but it is working against a concept that we know to be real in the NFL, and that is traditionally the biggest jump a player makes is from year 1 to year 2. Well, that's Jordan Love. That's not Romeo Dobbs. That's Jayden Reed. That's Dontavian Wicks. That's Tucker Kraft. That's Luke Musgrave. That's Rasheed Walker. That's Zach Tom. That's all the guys I just mentioned who they're going to regress. Well, why? Tell me why. And the only answer that I can come up with is that people are centering their own expectations and saying, because I expected these players to not be as good and they exceeded my expectations, they must therefore regress toward my expectation for them, even though that expectation was based on essentially nothing in the NFL because we hadn't seen any of these guys play. It doesn't make any sense to say, well, they exceeded expectations that were premised on nothing, and therefore they have to regress. I need one person to make compelling arguments. Just one person. If you hear someone, if you see someone, if you see something, say something. Send me a link. Send me the video. Send me the tweet. that you think makes a compelling case? Because I haven't seen it. Okay, I want to talk about corner and what I think really happened in the draft, why they didn't really address this. We're going to talk about that coming up on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. We've got an Eastern Conference Finals. We've got a Western Conference Finals, which means you only have 4 teams with a chance to win an NBA title. Take a look at those odds. There's some juicy opportunities for you there. NFL futures out there for you. You can bet on individual games already in the NFL. Week 1, those lines, they're out there. So go get yourself some bonus bets. The Packers, 1.5 point underdogs. And in fact, the Eagles are the most bet on money line in week 1 right now. That's crazy. They might move that line. They might. I need to bet it. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The cornerback draft situation reminds me of what happened in 2020 with receivers. I'll tell you what I mean. But are you sick of watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 streaming channel for sports, programmed for you every day with the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I was thinking about the cornerback situation for the Packers and why they might not have addressed that position sooner. And based on some conversations that I have had, based on the reporting that we have out there, based on what we heard from Brian Gutekunst, is they would have addressed corner earlier if they had the opportunity. Now, they had an opportunity in the first round to draft Cooper DeJean. They declined. But what is also true is right ahead of them, they got jumped for Terrion Arnold. In the second round, they got jumped for Cooper DeJean. Now, we do not know if the Packers would have taken either one of those players in that spot had they not been jumped. We just don't know. But that in particular sends a signal to me that other teams heard what I'd heard, and that the Packers early in the draft had some corners that they were really high on. And then remember what happened in 2020. The Packers get jumped for Brandon Ayuk. The reporting after that was, and this was, you may recall, Peter King speaking directly to Brian Gutekunst. He was essentially quoting Brian Gutekunst. And what Goody told Peter King was they had 2 more receivers after the first round group that they really liked. They tried to move up and get them. It doesn't take, a long search on Packers types to guess that those 2 players were probably Michael Pittman Jr. and Chase Claypool. And the fact that the Packers eventually tried to trade for Chase Claypool, I think only confirms that that was one of those players. They couldn't get up high enough. And what they decided was, at least this is what Brian Gutekunst said on the record, was that they didn't feel any of the rest of the receivers in the draft would move the needle on their team. In other words, they would not be better than Al Lazard and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and the other ancillary pieces to go around Devontae Adams, who we knew at that point was a star. Now that was the 2020 draft. And so 2020 was I believe that was the Devontae Adams' first all-pro season. That was when he announced himself as the best receiver in the game. And so, no, they didn't know that. But I think this played out a similar way. Now, I criticized the Packers in 2020 for treating it that way. I don't buy this, well, none of these players would move the needle for us now, and therefore we can't draft any of them. Like, I think that's nonsense. It was a really bad reason for them to say, well, we'd rather draft AJ Dillon or Josiah DeGuara. Now, I can't pinpoint the exact players that would have made more sense there from a receiver standpoint. But on day 3, they certainly had opportunities there as well. And they decided not to. Now, the board broke the way that the board broke, and I get that. Sometimes you just get unlucky. They were very clear that they didn't like the middle and late round guys. They just didn't think that they would move the needle for them. It's very possible, and I think in fact likely, that the exact same thing happened in this draft with corner. That if they'd had an opportunity, and I can't say for sure that it would have been Terrion Arnold when they picked Jordan Morgan, had the Bears or the Lions not gone up and jumped them, but the fact that the Lions went up and jumped them does suggest that at the very least, they thought he was not going to last much longer. And then the fact that the Eagles then do the same thing after already drafting a corner, by the way, suggests that they believe. The fact that it happened not once but twice, to me, suggests that these teams had an inkling that the Packers had some corners high on their board. Now, as I've said before, there is still a pathway to this team having some answers at corner because of the growth of Carrington Valentine, because of the health of Eric Stokes. And I really think Kalen King is a worthy developmental piece, someone that I would have taken late 3rd, early 4th. Like if we flipped Evan Williams and Kalen King's draft stock, I think we would be talking about this differently. And that matters in all of this. Like if Kalen King was their first 4th round pick, I don't think we'd be going, well, they didn't try and get a corner. Like what happened? No, they drafted a tackle when everyone thought they were going to draft a tackle. They drafted a linebacker when everyone thought they were going to draft a linebacker. Then they double dipped at linebacker. That, to me, is not proof that, oh, well, they didn't want a corner. No, those other positions were positions where they had some needs. And this is where they like to spend their draft capital. They like to build through the trenches. So nothing is surprising about drafting a tackle in the first round. We talked about it throughout the process that was a pretty likely outcome. Edgerrin Cooper was the guy that we projected they would draft at 45. You know, the Hopper pick was a bit of a weird one, and then they drafted a running back, another position where we thought they would draft someone in those middle rounds, 3, 4, 5. So I don't think that what happened early is necessarily proof that they didn't want a corner. And if King had gone 4th round or even 5th round, we'd be going, yeah, okay, see, they tried to address it. But because he's a 7th round pick, even though I thought he was a borderline top 100 type talent, and the perception of him, and you heard it from everydayers, at least heard it from Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl, coming out of the 2022 season, he was viewed as a potential 1st round pick and just didn't have the same 2023 season, seemed to lose his confidence. It didn't test particularly well, and it snowballed on him. But this is a player who has legit pedigree and talent. And if they had drafted him instead of Tyron Hopper, I would not have really thought it was that weird. If they had drafted him instead of Evan Williams or Keaton Oladapo or some of these other players that they took, or Jacob Monk, it would not have seemed weird to me at all. And we wouldn't be having this, well, why didn't they do anything at corner conversation? So that colors part of this too. But I do think their intention was to get someone early. The board didn't fall that way. And if I had to guess, they looked at the rest of these players, and in the situations where they were in, they liked other guys better, and they thought that those players would contribute more meaningfully to the team than those corners. And then finally they found the opportunity where that value hit the right threshold for them. We'll see if they were right. They were wrong about the receiver thing. Like they did not calculate that correctly in 2020, which is why in 2022 they had to go out and spend a bunch of draft capital on receivers. Now, they also happened to trade Devontae Adams, and that didn't help things either, but they thought they'd be fine, and it turned out they weren't. We'll see if that is also a mistake they made with corner. If there's going to be something that they're going to have to be able to do to mitigate that, it is find ways to pressure the quarterback. And this is where Jeff Hafley comes in. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. So many marquee tickets for you to be wanting for the Packers this season. 49ers, Sunday before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving night against the Dolphins. There's the home opener, always a good one. You've got the divisional games, especially if you're a green ticket package holder and you want the gold package. Listen, you can't complain about the gold package, people selling their tickets to rival fans and then you not buying them. If you want to go to those games, you can buy tickets too. And you can do it on Game Time. The Game Time app lets you save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or concerts. And you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you to get what they call a zone deal. Plus, you get a panoramic view from your seat and the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section in row for less. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. I want to talk about blitzing Jeff Hafley and the Eagles specifically. But I wanted you to also know Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So I heard a crazy stat the other day as I was preparing for the regular season, and that was, I believe this was on one of the athletic football shows, that teams blitzed the Eagles 44% of the time on third down. And that the gap between the most blitzed team on third down and the second most blitzed team on third down was the same gap between the second most blitzed team and the 18th most blitzed team. In other words, every defense was daring the Eagles to beat their blitz on third down. Why am I bringing this up now, a million miles away from week one? It is a way for me to think about the Packers, because as I heard that stat, I went, well, I know what Joe Barry would do. I know how he would handle the Eagles. Everyone blitzed them. Nah. Quarters all day. Last year, the Packers played man coverage on 32.5% of third downs, 22nd in the NFL. This is according to our pal Ben Fennell. Boston College last year played man coverage on third down 63% of the time, 63.1% of the time. That was the second highest in college football. In FBS college football, there's like 130 teams in FBS college football. Almost twice as often they're playing man coverage on third down. And when it comes to serious pressure, The Packers last year used all-out pressure, zero pressure, cover zero, 1.4% of the time. That was second to last. And they used red zone cover zero, last in the NFL, 4.5%. The Boston College defense used cover zero almost 8 times as often as the Packers. Now, 8.4% of snaps is not very many, but it is, in fact, I guess it's like 6 times more often. That was in the top quarter of college football. And in the red zone, they used cover zero 27.4% of times. Again, top quarter, top third-ish of college football. The Packers used 6-man pressure concepts just 4.2% of the time last year. That was 30th in the NFL. If you're going to make up for corners that have some deficiencies, one of the answers is to bring pressure. And the Packers lately have just not been interested, for whatever reason, in bringing 6-man pressures. Last year when they would pressure, it was mostly, especially at the end of the season, 5-man pressures. It was 4 rushers and a linebacker, or 4 rushers and a safety, or the nickel even at times. And they were feeling frisky when Joe Barry, had his grape nuts in the morning. Maybe he'd send a slot pressure or a cat pressure or a safety blitz once. That's not Jeff Hafley. If a team like, say, the Eagles has not proven that they can handle pressure, has not proven that they can handle the blitz, he's going to blitz them. He's going to blitz them. And when he does, he's going to have cool pressure looks. He's going to have designer pressure looks. Jeff Hafley is the kind of coach, it seems to me, based on people that I've talked to, people who study this stuff for a living, like I'm talking defenses, people who write books on defenses, like our pal Cody Alexander. They seem to think this is going to be a cover 3, cover 1, cover 0 kind of team. A lot of single high and some designer blitzes on third down especially. But when it's second and 12, second and 14, I think he's going to heat up quarterbacks. If it's third and pass, if it's third and 8+, guys are coming. And it's going to be exotics. It's going to be confusing. It's going to be chaos. And you, whether it works or not, are going to love it. I'm telling you. Because it is the kind of mentality that the Packers have not had in a long time. You can go back to the Dom Capers Fire Zone stuff. You can go back to some of the Mike Pettin stuff. And one of the reasons why the blitz packages with Mike Pettin didn't work is, number 1, they were predictable. Number 2, they didn't have the athletes to pull it off. That's why, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Edrin Cooper, blitz maniac. Evan Williams, he can blitz. Keaton Oladapo. These guys, they are second level, third level players who can affect the quarterback as blitzers. They have a lot more play. You don't just have to rely on Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith and Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt and all those dudes to get pressure on the quarterback when you have a defensive coordinator like Jeff Hafley who is ready and willing to say, this is my personnel. This is how we stack up. This is what you do poorly. And we're going to make you prove you can do it. And I can't wait to see it. All right, back tomorrow. Trevor Sikkema is going to be on the program with us. And we got more of these rookie orientation series coming. We've got some What's Next. Remember those? What's Next? Yes, that's coming. We're doing a lot more here on the Packers in the off season. We're still 5 days a week. It's what we do. It's what we do. So follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Locked On Packers. Go subscribe on the social medias. On the Instagram, Locked On Packers. On the TikToks, Locked On Packers. On YouTube, Locked On Packers. So you can stay Locked On Packers.